Hello everybody and welcome back to the Blues Knot channel. Today I am back with another video and I actually just got back home right now and it is currently 9 p.m. right now. I actually watched a movie with a friend just a couple of hours ago. He asked me if I want to go to watch a movie with him. I did, even though it was on a weeknight. But that means that now I got home later than I expected, and I still have to do this. I mean, I promised you guys yesterday that I was going to do the Eastern Conference prediction and then the Western Conference prediction tomorrow, and I was going to do what MLS is doing, which is do one video about the upcoming season every day leading up to Saturday, and here I am. I am, of course, going to do that, and which is why this setup that I have made right now, this is a very quick setup right now. It actually isn't even really perfect. In fact, I actually have the backlight like close, or not close, but open right there. I don't know. I forgot to switch it off. Yeah, so you can tell I'm sort of rushed right now with this. But without further ado, let's actually begin in terms of the prediction of the Eastern Conference and where I think these 11 teams will finish. Now, before I begin this video, I just want to quickly say that if you're watching this video and one of your team is one of the team that you support play in the Eastern Conference, and if you think that I put your team a little bit lower than what you expected, and if you think that the team that I put that missed the playoffs, but you really think that they definitely are not going to miss the playoffs and they're going to make the playoffs, let me know in the comments below, and definitely do not try to be salty with this. You know, this is just my opinion. This is definitely not the official kind of prediction, and usually predictions in the beginning of the season always tends to be wrong. So, you know, just don't take this very seriously. Don't take this as this is what it's going to look like when the season is done. But yeah, without further ado, let's actually begin this prediction, and we're going to start off in the bottom, and we are going to say, or I'm going to say, that the team that's going to get the wooden spoon in the Eastern Conference is going to be the Revs. It's going to be the New England Revolution. And by the way, I don't know why the camera just gone fuzzy a little bit there. I hope it focused in a bit. But yeah, I'm going to say New England is going to finish bottom. And if you are a Revs fan, all I have to say is that prepare for a very long and painful season for you guys, because this Revs team is coming into this upcoming season is dealing with a lot of issue. And, you know, one of the issue that they're going to deal with during this season is been kind of an ongoing for almost the entire off season, and that of course is the league win situation, and whether or not if he eventually is going to get his desired move away from the club. I mean, he's been already saying that he does not want to play for the Revs anymore. He felt like they're not giving him enough chances to play, and that he really want to go into like a new direction, and the Revs just clearly say no and pretty much just hold him in hostage, and that really kind of pissed Lead off a lot, and he didn't even show up in their preseason kind of meetup. So I think this is going to be a big kind of things that they need to fix. But like I said, that's not the only issue that they need to fix. The other issue that they need to fix is pretty much the entire starting 11. I mean, they have problems in their starting 11 from top to bottom. And we start with the defense, which, you know, last season that defense was absolute hot garbage. They conceded 61 goals last season, which was the second most in the league. And yet, this offseason, they did absolutely nothing to fix it. And I honestly don't know why. They did nothing to try to fix that defense that was just clearly super leaky. And because of that, I think they potentially is going to concede almost the same amount of goals that they conceded last season. And the other thing is that you look at the midfield, moving up to the midfield, I mean, besides maybe Callan Rowe could maybe have another breakout kind of year like he did last year, this midfield looks very, very weak too. And, there's just no other players that I see in that midfield kind of excite me and kind of say that they can have a breakout year. And then going up front, they don't have anybody up front that can potentially score goals for them. Maybe Juan Aguilera can do that, but then again, you can't just expect him to just carry the whole team like that. And what if he gets injured again? Because he did get injured a couple of times last season. So, for New England, everything is going wrong with them coming into the new season. And that is always not a good sign if you have everything going wrong with you and you're coming into the new season. And by the way, the camera still hasn't been able to focus. I do apologize. Oh wait, there we go. It has just focused a little bit there, but yeah, I think New England's gonna finish dead bottom, finishing 10th place, second to bottom. I think it's gonna be the Impact of Montreal. Let me just finish writing their name. Yeah, there you go. Montreal is gonna finish 10th, and I know it seemed like they are going to finish a little bit lower than what they did, and they're going to do a little bit worse than what they did because they finished 8th last season. But I think Montreal is sort of like in a little bit of a rebuilding mode right now. They are clearly moving in a direction where they want some young player. They want to have a couple of young talented player on their team to trying to change it up a little bit, because we know that Montreal has a very kind of old squad. I mean, their core is just so old right now. Their midfield, last season was just, that was one of the issue that I think many people would point out with Montreal heading into last season. Their midfield is just so old right now. It has a combined age of over 100 years old, and I just think that it's not going to work out throughout the whole season. And would you believe it clearly didn't work out throughout the whole season? I mean, maybe beside Piatti continue to bang in that kind of midfield trio, it's just not, they just didn't do much at all. And the other thing about Montreal is that they didn't have any striker that can be very lethal to them. They really don't have that kind of guy from last season, and they still don't have that guy. They still haven't signed a promising kind of forward and promising kind of striker that can just put away goals game after game. So I really think for Montreal, this is going to be a rebuilding year, and they kind of got a starter piece with Raheem Edwards joining from Toronto. He's one of the young talent from Toronto, and he was really decent for Toronto last year. But that's just kind of like a starting piece for Montreal as they continue to try to get some younger player on to their team and getting a couple of their older guys the older guys that they have got rid of this offseason include Lawrence Simmons and also Malice. Both of them, of course, went to LAFC. So, yeah, I mean, I really think this is a rebuilding year for Montreal. And like most rebuilding team, they usually finish near the bottom of the table. So that's why I put them there. Now, finishing in 9th place, it's going to be DC United. Now, DC has definitely improved from this year. I think they're definitely going to improve. They got a new manager. They obviously are about to open a new stadium. And they also got a couple of key acquisitions. They got Darren Maddox from Portland Timber. They got Yasmil Assad from Atlanta. Obviously, that probably is the bigger acquisition that they got. And, this team definitely looks very good in the midfield area, and certainly this team definitely looks much better on the attacking end now with Maddox and Assad in there. But I still think DC United is not going to come near the playoff position, and there are a couple of reasons why. One, their defense is still very shaky. They didn't do anything to address that after that defense conceded 60 odd goals. And the second reason is that they do not have Bill Hamid anymore to bail them out in terms of the defensive end. And they also lost Perry Kitchen in that central defenseman, although I think Perry Kitchen wasn't really that good with DC. So I think that it's not really a bad loss for them. But Bill Hamid, that's obviously a big loss because he was a guy that, prevented a couple of those goals that they could have. Like, he literally prevented this team to potentially concede 70 or 80 odd goals. That was how bad the DC United defense was. And the final thing that I will say that they'll probably not make the playoffs is because of their schedule. I mean, their schedule is just so crazy this year. They're going to be on the road for so long in the first half of the season because their new stadium is not opening until June. And I think they only have like 2 home games in the first half of the season, 2 home games before they open Audi Stadium, or Audi Field as they call it. So the schedule is definitely not kind to DC United, and I just think they're going to struggle this year, and they're going to finish in 9th place. Heading into 8th place now. Teams that's going to finish 8th, and this team actually finished 8th last season also. It's going to be the Philadelphia Union. Now, the Union, obviously, I'm pretty sure a lot of Union fans were celebrating like they won the MLS Cup when they found out that David Accam is coming to the Union. Probably that is the biggest move that the Union have made throughout the last couple of seasons. And that kind of sums up how the Union are in terms of their team and the way that their front office run their team, because the Union, in terms of their front office and in terms of how they're trying to sign players, it's kind of like what the Quakes do when we used to have our old GM and used to just sign some cheap player and think that they would develop, but it turns out that wasn't the case. That is pretty much what Philadelphia Union is right now, and I definitely feel the pain, Union fans. I obviously been there before, and I'm obviously happy that you guys finally got Accam as one of the player that you desperately needed, and one of the player that you've been crying, one of the star player that you've been crying out for so long. But at the end of the day, I still don't think Accam is going to save you in terms of not going to give you guys, not going to push you to playoff spot. And as great as David Accam was with that Chicago Fire team last season, this Philadelphia team does not have like a lot of star player in their team. I mean, maybe besides CJ Sapon and Andre Blake, I really don't see any other guys that I can name that can be potentially an influential player for Philadelphia right now. So, sorry, Union fans, you're probably going to be stuck in 8th. Although, if you can make more of these kind of David Accam kind of signing, then I think you can have a chance. I think in the next couple of years, or maybe in the summer, if you can sign a kind of David Accam kind of player, I think the Union could find themselves moving up. But as of now, I just don't see it. I still think they're going to stuck in that same position as they were last year because Accam is the only guy that they made in this off season, and I just think that it's still not enough for them. But going into 7, and this team actually is the only team that I actually put that is going to miss the playoffs, but they made the playoffs last season. Actually, let me just finish writing here. And that is the Columbus Crew. And actually, I did a bad job with the S right there with Columbus. But, yeah, Columbus Crew is the only team that I put that is going to be below the red line, that was above the red line, made the playoffs last season. And by the way, if you haven't joined the movement, make sure you do that. Save the Crew movement. Make sure you join that kind of movement. Make sure you let your voice heard, and hope that the Crew, of course, will not be moving to Austin next year, which unfortunately it looks like it is now more and more likely that that's not going to happen. And and the other thing is, it's kind of it was really hard for me to not put the Crew into the playoff spot, but the reason why I think they're going to miss the playoffs and going to regress this year is because they just lost two of their best players in their team, and the two players that really was the heart and soul of them making the playoffs. And those two players was their leading goal scorer, Ola Kamara, and they replaced him with Jarzy Zardes. Yeah, Jarzy Zardes is a replacement that they have after they trade away Ola Kamara. Well, actually, they got Zardes from that Kamara trade, but yeah, I don't know why people say Zardes is going to potentially be have a breakout year with the Crew, and how, you look at what he did in the preseason, he's going to have a breakout year. First of all, do not ever look at preseason performance and just completely claim that that's going to how it is in the regular season. I know I said this before, but preseason usually doesn't tell you how the team actually is. And, for the Crew and for Zardes, I'm still not convinced that he can discover his form that he was in 2013. And if he's going to be the replacement for Kamara, that is a big, big downgrade in terms of the attack. And then the other guy they lost is Justin Moran, who they, of course, traded to or sold to Orlando City. And he was a guy that was the heart and soul in terms of developing those attack and able to play those very nice through ball into the attacking thread and into the striker. And now without him, that's a huge missing piece for Columbus. Columbus still has a couple of good talents on their team, but I just think that losing those two players will be just enough in terms of them getting regress and just not making the playoff. Now, I think the only way that when I see this, and the only way that maybe Columbus won't make the playoffs this season, is that if Greg Berhalter will do what exactly he did last season, which is get the best out of the player. Berhalter is perhaps one of, if not the best manager in terms of getting the best out of the player. I think him and Wilmer Cabrera is really the guys that really brings the best out of their players, and I think if he can do the same thing this year, then maybe the Crew does have a chance to get into the playoffs and maybe make a last hurrah before potentially they're going to be moving to Austin. But either way, now we are now officially above the red line, and these are the teams that is going to make the playoffs. And the first team that is just going to barely sneak in the playoffs is going to be the Chicago Fire. And, for the Fire, I really think this is going to be like Columbus. They're going to regress because they lost a couple of key players. Well, they actually only lost one key player on their team. And that key player is David Accam. As I mentioned before, him going to Philadelphia. And that is a huge loss for Chicago, because we saw last season when Accam was injured and when they did not play with Accam, with him in the starting 11, the Fire looked very human. And they didn't look like a team that was just tearing the Eastern Conference apart back in June. And, and they got fined out. And I know that the Fire have been trying to find a replacement for that. I know that they got that guy called, I think, Katic, if that's how you pronounce his last name. His first name is Alexander, so I'm just going to say Alexander instead. But they try to replace him with Alexander, and I don't know much about this guy, so I'm assuming that he probably won't be a good replacement for Accam, because Accam is just such a good player for the Fire, and he's definitely probably one of, if not the best winger in MLS right now. And even though they still have majority of their core intact, they still have Dax McCarty, they still have Schweinsteiger, and they still have Nikolic on their team. I don't know if, even with their core that they still have, I just don't know if this Fire team can be as good as they were last season. I think they're like I said, the big reason that I have to give why the Fire is going to regress is because of Accam leaving the Fire, and how it's going to be a little bit tricky for the Fire to making sure that they can do what they did last season. But I think they'll still be good enough to make the playoffs. I think that core should be just good enough to sneak them into the playoffs. But yeah, that's where I have them in 6th place. And in 5th place, and this team was in 6th last year, I moved them up 1 spot this time, is the Red Bulls. And for the New York Red Bulls, for the 2nd year in a row, they sold their captain to another team. Last year it was Dax McCarty. This year is Sasha Kljestan. Now, the good news for the Red Bulls is that this time when they sell Sasha Kljestan to Orlando City, I think this was a good decision for the Red Bulls, because Sasha Kljestan was on the wrong end of pretty much in his 30s, and he is pretty much he pretty much have maybe 2 or 3 years left in that team before he really goes into a decline. And what a way to just trying to get someone that is much younger and certainly have much talented, than instead of just keeping Sasha Kljestan, which I know he was one of the fan favorites, but the Red Bulls had to try to find a way to get younger, and they did. They signed a new DP called Kaku. I'm not quite sure exactly which way is the right way to pronounce. And he is one of those young South American kind of import that is just coming to the MLS by storm this offseason. And, I think that will really kind of help out that Red Bulls attack. Well, not really help out, but really just improve, even give a bigger upgrade in terms of that Red Bull attack, because we know the Red Bull has a very good attack. I mean, with guys like Tyler Adams, Bradley Wright Phillip, and now Kaku in there, it's going to be a very good kind of attack. But the only reason why I don't put them higher than 5th is because the top 4 teams just seems to have a little bit better squad as what the Red Bulls has right now. I think they're still missing maybe 1 or 2 key player on their team to really become an elite team. But I think the Red Bulls can make the playoffs again. They've been a very kind of consistent team in terms of making the playoffs. And yeah, that's why I'm gonna be putting them in 5th. But yeah, moving on now into the top 4. And the team that is going to be finished 4th place, and this is the only team that I put that missed the playoff last season but will make the playoff this season, is going to be Orlando City. If you want to know which team had the best off season and which team made the most progress and pretty much just completely overhauled their team doing this off season, then Orlando City should be your team, because they went on a pretty much a shopping spree in this off season. I mean, and really, this shopping spree that they've been on all started back in July when they got Dom Dwyer from Sporting KC, and then after that, doing the off season, they continue that kind of just trying to put a lot of good MLS veteran in that team with the likes of Justin Moran, who was the other one? Coleman, Rosso, and also Sasha Kljestan in that Orlando City team. And with all those pieces in that team, it's pretty clear that Orlando City is going all in this year, and that, because they're going all in this year, they are expected to challenge in the Eastern Conference. And I think for Orlando City manager just Jason Kreis, if there is a guy that is going to be on the hot seat and probably the first guy that is going to get sacked in this new season, it's probably going to be just Jason Kreis. I don't know why I keep saying Justin Kreis. His name is Jason Kreis though, but for Jason Kreis, this is it for him. I mean, he's been at times making some excuses, the fact that he didn't have the best squad. Well, guess what? The front office just bought you a whole bunch of talent in your team and just completely remake that midfield, remake that attack, and also remake that defense. Now all you have to do is making sure that this team gets into the playoffs, and not only get into the playoffs, but make sure they get competitive in the playoffs. Because, like I said, Orlando City, they're going all in. They probably have 1 or 2 year left before all those guys is going to go into a decline, and they're going to have to retool and probably rebuild. So this is it for them. This is just the last hurrah for them and the last attempt for them to finally get into the playoff. It's hard to believe that Orlando City has not made the playoffs in their existence. I mean, there's been just so much hype surrounding Orlando City when they were first founded, with Kaká coming in and all these other good players like Kyle Larin on their team. But, now both of them is no longer with the team, and now with those kind of big players coming into Orlando City, it's gonna be time that they really need to get themselves to finally make it to the playoff promised land, or else there's going to be a lot of people, including Jason Kreis, that is going to get fired because of that. But either way, finishing in third place, moving into the top 3, and these next 2 teams I'm going to put are going to be a big threat to TFC. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to put TFC here in first because we all know that they're going to probably finish in first place. I don't really need to kind of explain why Toronto is going to finish first again, because this team is just so good in every aspect of their team. They have good depth, they have good attack, they have good midfield, they have good defense. They have everything that you would want a MLS team to have. And for those people that say that Toronto is going to probably not do as well as last season because they have CCL, and because that since they have won everything, that aberration of winning more might be started to kind of dwindle. No, I don't believe that. They just got much better now, and even with the guys that they lost, like Raheem Edwards and Steven Beitashour, they just replaced with even a better guy. I mean, Van der Waal coming in for Beitashour, who is definitely much better than Beitashour, and I forgot who was the other guy that replaced Raheem Edwards, but yeah, this TFC team I just have a feeling that this TFC team is gonna once again trying to roll over the Eastern Conference and trying to repeat to win that title. Now, that's, of course, is where I get to second and third, and who exactly could be the biggest threat to their success this year. The first team is going to be NYCFC. And the reason why I say that is because NYCFC has equally a talented squad on their hand. I mean, guys like David Villa, Rodney Harris, and Maxi Morales on their team. And also recently they got Jesus Medina in the offseason. This team looks like they are ready to try to once again challenge TFC for that Eastern Conference title. Now, the only thing I will say about NYCFC, and this has nothing to do with the standings, though, and I know people will kind of complain the fact that why I put NYCFC third instead of second because they finished second last year. Well, there's going to be another team that I will mention why I think could finish second, but it's going to be very tight between second and third either way with these two teams challenging Toronto. But for NYCFC, the only concern I have with them is that, can they do it in the playoffs? Like, we know this team can do it in the regular season, but can they do it in the playoff? And so far, the last 2 seasons, Patrick Vieira team has just not proven to me that they can do it in the playoffs, because twice they got knocked out in the first playoff game that they're in. It's almost like as if when they get into the playoff, they just look stone cold. And last year, they lost 4-0. Was it 4-0 or was it 4-1? I think it was 4-1 against Columbus on the first leg, and that really just took a dent to their playoff. I mean, they won the second leg, and then a couple of years ago, I forgot what was the resort, and I forgot who was the other team that they lost to. But for NYCFC, if they want to challenge Toronto, if they want to challenge TFC for that Eastern Conference title, they really need to first take care of their own business in the playoffs and actually need to get to TFC and face them head-to-head first. Because if you don't face them head-to-head, and if you don't face them in that situation in the playoffs and you just get knocked out in the first round, what's the point? Like, there definitely doesn't look like they're going to challenge them if they are not going to get to face them in the playoffs. So that is one thing that NYCFC, that's the ultimate goal for NYCFC this season. Not only they want to have a good regular season, but they also want to make sure that they can have enough in the postseason so that they can knock off some of these smaller teams and then challenge TFC. But the other team that is potentially going to challenge TFC for this Eastern Conference kind of crown is going to be Atlanta United. And Atlanta United, they probably have the scariest attack of any other team in the MLS, and that includes Toronto. If you look at the attack that they have, they already had Joseph Martinez, Valabar, and also who was it? Miguel Almiron on their team. Well, now in this offseason, they decided to literally put that deadly attack to overdrive now, because they just splashed $15 million, a record kind of amount of money, to sign a very talented and one of the most promising young player in the world called Ezequiel Barco from Argentina. And yeah, I mean, this is going to be a really, really good kind of team. And it's going to be, if you want a team that is going to be very entertained this season, Atlanta United is going to be a team. This team is going to be so entertaining to watch, because they have just a really good defense so far this season, and they're going to score a lot of goals, and I won't be surprised if they break the record for the most goal. And in fact, I will be surprised if they don't score more than 60 goals this season, because that is how good their attack is. And the only thing I'm concerned with Atlanta, besides maybe the fact that can they get over the hump with the playoffs. I mean, last season, I can't really say that they kind of bottled it in the playoffs, with the fact that, they had all the momentum coming into that game against the Crew and they just lost to them. But still, I think Atlanta, that was just their first year. You can sort of make an excuse the fact that that of course was the first year. It was the first time in the playoffs, and usually not a lot of teams will always tend to just even as much as that team is and how great that team is, it's very rare you see teams go into the playoffs and their first game of the playoffs and you expect them to do well. This time I think Atlanta will definitely have bigger expectation and definitely want to get past the playoffs. But the other thing that I'm concerned with Atlanta is the midfield. The midfield right now with Atlanta, they did lose Carlos Carmona, who were really just the engine of this team last season. He was the guy that did all the dirty work and just not letting any player to trying to get through the back line of Atlanta. And now that he's no longer there, and they really haven't quite find a replacement for him, that is what I'm kind of concerned. And for some people that say that Darlington Nagbe, who was another player that surprisingly signed for Atlanta and made a big accusation. And that was, of course, one of the big acquisitions for Atlanta this offseason. And some people say that he can potentially play in the role of Carlos Carmona. Yeah, I don't know what you're thinking right now, because Darlington Nagbe is clearly a different player to Carlos Carmona. He's not like Carlos Carmona at all. He's not like that kind of box-to-box kind of midfield, kind of that players that do the dirty work in the midfield position. He is sort of a guy that tends to like to go for a lot and go on the attacking end, and he of course is not going to be a guy that will do those dirty works. He's a very attacking kind of player. So to put him in a role that require him to do a lot of defensive work when he's an attacking player, just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So yeah, I don't know where Darlington Nagbe will fit. I don't know where Tata Martino will put him in the starting 11. I mean, I know a couple of months ago, if we saw like Darlington Nagbe going to Atlanta, and people were obviously happy about it. Now, as we find out where exactly he will fit into the system, that kind of happiness has turned into kind of concern for Atlanta. I mean, you don't know where exactly is he going to fit very well, and is he going to even fit the Tata Martino system, which is a very kind of attacking kind of system, but then again, it also requires some of the wingers to kind of like track back and stuff like that, and Nagbe is not that kind of guy that likes to just track back. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. That I think that's the only weakness that Atlanta might have that potentially can challenge TFC for that Eastern Conference crown. But other than that, I think they'll probably finish near the top 3. And yeah, that of course is pretty much my prediction of this starting, or not starting 11, but this is my prediction of all 11 teams that will finish in the Eastern Conference. Again, if I put your team that is kind of like below the red line, and you're not happy with it and you want to kind of complain in the comments, just letting you know that this is not going to be potentially how it's going to play out this season. I mean, well, I think the East, in terms of how it is right now, I'm pretty sure that we know that these 3 teams will definitely, well, these 4 teams will definitely make the playoffs. Well, actually, maybe Orlando City and maybe the Red Bulls definitely might make the playoff. The Fire is still kind of a question, and maybe one of these teams can kind of sneak in. But the East is sort of, it's definitely a very strong kind of conference. It's still going to be the strongest conference out of the 2, but the East, there at least it's a little bit predictable of who exactly is going to finish. But you never know, some of these teams might have a surprising season, might pull off something that I definitely did not expect them to do. So if you're one of those fans of these teams and you're not happy that they're below the red line, don't give up hope yet. Maybe they'll just do some crazy things and somehow they'll make the playoffs. But either way, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I will see you guys next time.